Hi, everybody. This is Nicole Bradford here, Executive Director and co-founder of the Transformative Technology Lab and Conference. And we have such a great chat for you today. I'm here with Dr. Bruce Damer. And Dr. Damer is one of those people when you think about if you could be an expert in all the things that you thought were the most interesting things and thought, oh, well, maybe I don't have enough time to do that. And then you meet someone who actually is that expert. Dr. Damer's background covers everything from working on a NASA land rover to what he's going to talk about today, a recent discovery that he and a group of colleagues have been working on and was published. So, Dr. Damer, Bruce, would you tell everyone a little bit about your background so that they just know how you're kind of like the bond of transformative technology with the number of skills and talents that you have. So I'll stop gushing and
thanks. Gush away. Yeah, I was a nerdy kid in Canada, and where I was raised, and I'm still a nerdy kid. So that's my secret, I guess. I was really interested in emergence, the phenomenon of emergence, and even my own consciousness emerging. So I studied how plants grow. And then one day when I was 14, I had this epiphany about how life might have begun while walking out in nature. And it gave me clues. So I started working on it until through many paths, many consciously driven paths led to this, which is this new publication last year. It was just republished again last month, New Origins of Life. And what Scientific American did to illustrate our model that I developed with David Damer is this wonderful spiraling diagram of lipid vesicles cycling in a wet, drying pool. It's driven by a hot spring. So we call this the hot spring origin of life. And here's the entire landscape that it lives in. And we know that the landscape was like this because we go out to Australia and we pick up rocks like this one. And this is one of the oldest evidence for life on Earth. It's stromatolite from the Pilbara. It's 3 billion years old. These little ridges are left. They're the imprints of microbial mats. And we're doing all that because next month I'm going to LA because we're trying to decide where to land this. It's the Mars 2020 rover.
Wow.
And we have our final 2.5 weeks from now, we have our final vote on where to set this vehicle down. And it's going to go, there's like a drill core thing on the front, and it's going to collect rock samples. It's going to look for things like you just saw, the ripple rocks. But it's also going to cache samples for later return. So
wow.
That's in a nutshell what I'm working on at the moment.
And if you could, we talked a little bit about this before we started, but if you could, for everyone who's going to watch this video, tie the work that you're doing to transformative technology and also to consciousness.
Yeah, I talked to Jeffrey Martin. I've been on the board of the TTC for, I think, since the beginning, the sort of advisory board. And I've gone to every meeting. And I've just been incredibly fascinated by these ways to open us into non-ordinary states, to affect healing, to break us out of the box of sort of cognitive constipation, if you will. I just love it. I love the community. And talking to Jeffrey last year, I'd just done a talk at the SAND conference, which is Science and Non-Duality, just down the road. And in order to prepare for that, I asked myself, what does the origin of life have to do with consciousness? So as usual, I did a thought experiment one night after months of trying to ponder it. And it came to me that the origin of life, that cycling little pool with the individual protocells with their polymers that are being selected and that can boot up into the first living cells, that's an engine. And that engine started 4 billion years ago and is still running. And everything is spun off of that engine, including the conscious experience. So then I went deeply into the engine, said, what's the engine made up of? And I determined it's a triangle of 3 properties. On the top, it's probability shaping. which gets things to happen that wouldn't otherwise happen. And then it creates more interconnection, more messaging between a complex system. A network is born, and then the network writes and reads memories for the next round. And that's the birth and death and life cycle. So how does that tie to consciousness? Well, I think that since consciousness emerged on the matrix of us, of living beings and the whole world that we're in, it's driven by the same cycle. So the inquiry that I have is to ask, how does this boot up and run the conscious experience on a nanosecond by nanosecond basis? If this is true, we found a theory of everything. We found an engine of creation. And talking with Mikey Siegel this weekend, I posed this to him and he said, aha, here's where you can apply this. If we have a system where we have the heart sync and we have Buddhist monks that's doing this week at Esalen, where they have monks whose heart rate is shown on a light, and they're getting sound and art, and then they're passing that on to the next person, and they're chanting with the heart rate, heart sync, and people start to get into synchrony, and they flash that technology and that setup is exactly this cycling system that's working, and it's cycling that group into higher and higher states of consciousness right there in the room in Esalen. It's actually working. I can see the same cycle. He showed me videos, which I'll use. Yeah, it's like, wow, it's a system that does the same thing. It crowds people together so that they interact and miraculous things happen. It cycles their experience through a network, and then they remember. They like, oh, I had that insight, and they share it with the group. And then the next time the group meets and sits, they evolve. So this is a machine for evolving the same thing. My goodness.
Are you saying then it's like this system could be used to think about human behavior, human groups, really sort of anything. It might, I see. So basically, since what you published in Scientific American, that this model that we're able to observe in biological systems, like the ones in the pools, if that is the framework for all of the various forms of life, then that means not just our physical, not just our physicality, but also our group behavior, our conscious behavior, that this just might be how it whirls up and out. And so if we're thinking about societal change, if we're thinking about the future of work, and how society has to evolve to take on the higher level of automation, then all of the people who are thinking systemically about what that means could look to this model for guidance.
Yeah. And I'm now seeing everything through the lens of this and see it everywhere, from a forest to the Luminous Awareness Institute, a practice we just did for 5 days in Nevada City. I saw it working in that room, and the energies that come up and the healings that happen it's the same system.
What do you think the implications are for the development of technology? So, our audience is, our entire audience is really either entrepreneurs or innovators who are making technologies, specifically many of them driven by the exponential technology. So AI, machine learning, network sensors, all of the different technologies that there are out there that, are used for, traditional productivity uses that are now being applied to the state of the human mind, self-awareness. What are the implications for those technologies? What can people understand about this discovery to actually put it into their product design?
Yeah, actually, Mikey came up with it. So after this exploration and explanation, he said, here, what you've come up with is design principles for TransTech, for products and systems. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, think about it. Apply your three-way cycling system to what we are doing at Esalen. What would you add to it to make it more effective? And I said, I'd add a memory button. So if the monk is chanting and at the heart was based on his heart rate, and he's also getting a visual field or auditory field, and something really clicks. Have a button that the monk can push and say, record from 2 seconds back everything, this short segment. And so now there's a memory strip of that experiential thing that he says, that really worked. Record that, and then share that with the group. And then they try it on for size too. Like, oh, that did something else. And then they add a strip of recorded sequence that worked for them. And then you have a genetic code running in the technology. And that genetic code is shared and modified by the participants. And it could be an individual just saying, hey, that meditative state really works for me. I'll just repeat it, right? Or that breath work works for me. But if they have a device, they don't have to use their human memory. They can record into the device the stimulus that opened a door for them.
Right. Well, what are your thoughts on things that get passively recorded and things that get deliberately recorded? Like, designing something like that, is it that sort of like everything's recorded, or eventually do you think that the systems itself? So let's say, there's a lot of people who are doing centaur therapists, so like AI or AI based therapy, or AI based mentoring and knowledge transfers. That's their goal. It's not quite there yet. Do you think that the human saying, "Okay, this has happened now," would eventually give way to a automatic sensing of biosignals to say that something happened? Or do we need that human input at that point to be able to characterize it, because the machine learning and AI just isn't there yet?
Yeah, I think that we do. We need the human input. So for example, a great master that's teaching a group like Alan Watts, for example, who's always my go-to example. What he would do over years and years of lectures is he would hit certain bells and create certain sounds. And he noticed as a Zen master that would crack people's system or would break their concentration or the lock that they were in. And so then he developed a library of bowls and things like this and techniques and humming and all the kinds of things he did. And he just remembered, he wrote notes and things like this. But what if you could automatically do that? So the system at least sees a bump in a neural response or in a heart rate response. And it suggests that is impactful for the person and it helps them along, and then they say, okay, we're going to repeat that. We're going to record that. But sometimes things are totally internal and there's going to be no physiological response. Probably in a full enlightened awakening may not be physiologically detectable. It may come across as increased blood pressure, but what's going on in the mind is something extraordinary.
That's a really good point. As you know, last year with our work, we had people go through a meditation protocol, and we, for a year, took heart rate variability, galvanic skin response, and EEG. And that data is still being parsed through. And the goal is to see if there's a signal. But, the truth is that nobody knows if there's a signal yet.
And if you could, have we lost the connection? You're frozen, but I seem to be still here. Well, if we could, Nicole, there's life and there's editing. I'm going to refresh. Okay, I'm back. Can you all see me here, all the guests? Can you hear me? Put up the chat window. Retrieving. There she is.
Hello?
We have retrieved you.